It is the 30th of September 1862, and the newly appointed Prime Minister, a man known as Otto von Bismarck, is in the midst of a furious battle with the liberal members of the Prussian Landtag. The subject was a legislative struggle over the sanctioning of an increase in Prussia's military budget. Faced with refusal over the budget, Otto von Bismarck immortalized his name in history with this response, a fiery speech concerning German unification, by saying, "It is not by means of speeches and majority resolutions that the great issues of the day will be decided. That was the great mistake of 1848 and 49, but by blood and iron." Through this speech, Otto von Bismarck would eventually become known as the Iron Chancellor. This is the historiographer, and in this video, we will explore part 1 on the father of Germany, Otto von Bismarck, the founder of a nation. Otto Eduard Leopold von Bismarck was born into a well-off Prussian noble family in 1815 at Schönhausen, a noble estate in Prussian Saxony. His father, Karl Wilhelm Ferdinand von Bismarck, was a former Prussian military officer and owner of an estate, while his mother, Wilhelmine Louise Mencken, hailed from a respected Berlin family with connections to senior government officials. A short time after he was born, the aristocratic family relocated to their Pomeranian estate, northeast of Stettin, where Bismarck spent his idyllic childhood. Bismarck received his education in various elementary and secondary schools. He then pursued higher studies in law at the University of Göttingen from 1832 to 33, before spending the next 2 years at the University of Berlin. While serving as an army reservist in Greifswald in 1838, Bismarck also pursued studies in agriculture. However, he did not take his studies seriously, often preferring to party with his friends. As a young man, Bismarck appeared as the typical Prussian Junker from a militaristic background, which was an image he actively encouraged by wearing uniforms, which for the longest time were only decorated with a Prussian life-saving medal earned by saving a drowning cavalryman in the year 1842. Bismarck also had a cosmopolitan education and displayed conversational prowess and charisma. Although the young Bismarck initially aspired to pursue a diplomatic career, he embarked on a practical training as a lawyer in Aachen. He soon relinquished this path after endangering his professional prospects by taking an unauthorized leave to pursue romantic involvements. In 1838, Bismarck commenced compulsory military service in the Prussian army, serving as a 1-year volunteer before becoming an officer in the Landwehr. Following his mother's death in his mid-20s, he returned to manage the family estates at Schönhausen, coming as a relief to Herr Bismarck, escaping the dreadful Prussian bureaucratic system. Around the age of 30, Bismarck exchanged vows with Johanna Puttkamer. Bismarck and Johanna enjoyed a long and harmonious relationship. Johanna was a reserved and deeply religious Lutheran, who no doubt changed the Mad Bismarck into a more pious and thoughtful man, being a significant catalyst for his future Kulturkampf. In 1847, Bismarck was elected to the Landtag. During this time, Bismarck was no different than any Prussian estate holder, gaining a fierce reputation as a royalist and a reactionary. Indeed, Bismarck openly espoused the belief of the divine right of monarchs to rule, hence solidifying his position as a staunch supporter of the Hohenzollern ruling family. In March of 1848, Prussia found itself amidst a revolution, which was part of a wave of liberal, nationalist revolutions that swept across Europe, whose seeds lay in the Napoleonic ideals. The Prussian monarch, King Friedrich Wilhelm IV, initially failed, or rather, refused to use military force to suppress the rebellion, raising discontent among Prussian officers. The king made numerous concessions. For example, he promised to establish a constitution to support the eventual merging of Prussia and other German states into a single nation state, as well as other concessions. Ever the erratic young man, and seeing his worst enemies, the liberals, in control, the staunch traditionalist Bismarck endeavored to rally the peasants on his estate and march on Berlin to defend the king, even traveling to Berlin in secret to offer his services. He was, however, instructed to assist in arranging food supplies for the army from his farms in case of need. Unsatisfied, Bismarck attempted to remove the concessionist king by all means, and he even attempted to place Friedrich Wilhelm, a teenage Hohenzollern prince, on the Prussian throne as a replacement for Friedrich Wilhelm IV. However, the Princess Augusta, the mother of the teenage prince, vehemently rejected the idea and developed a strong dislike for Bismarck. Luckily for the Prussian, the liberal movement eventually collapsed by the end of 1848 due to internal conflicts. Meanwhile, the conservative forces regrouped and regained control of Berlin. Although a constitution was granted, its provisions fell far short of the revolutionaries' demands. In 1849, Bismarck was elected to the Landtag. At this stage of his career, he opposed the unification of Germany, arguing that it would lead to the loss of Prussia's independence. We are Prussians, and Prussians we shall remain. We do not wish to see the Kingdom of Prussia obliterated in the putrid brew of cozy South German sentimentality. Nevertheless, he reluctantly accepted his appointment as one of Prussia's representatives at the Erfurt Parliament, an assembly of German states convened to discuss plans for unification. The parliament's efforts to achieve unification failed due to a lack of support from Prussia and Austria, the two most influential German states. Following the Hesse Crisis of 1850, Prussia suffered a humiliating defeat and was forced to back down by Austria. As a result, a plan for German unification under Prussian leadership was abandoned. In 1851, Friedrich Wilhelm IV appointed Bismarck as Prussia's envoy to the Diet of the German Confederation in Frankfurt. In Frankfurt, he engaged in a battle of wills with the Austrian Count Friedrich von Thun, the Austrian representative. Bismarck insisted on being treated as an equal and employed petty tactics such as mimicking Thun when he claimed privileges like smoking and removing his jackets during meetings. During his 8 years in Frankfurt, Bismarck underwent significant changes in his political views. No longer under the influence of his ultra-conservative friends, Bismarck became less reactionary and more pragmatic. He grew convinced that Prussia needed to ally with other German states to counterbalance Austria's resurgent influence. This shift in perspective made him more receptive to the idea of a unified Germany under Prussian hegemony. Without a doubt, he gradually came to believe that it was the responsibility of himself in creating a united nation to prevent being overshadowed. He also recognized that the middle-class liberals desired a unified Germany more than they wanted a dismantling of the traditional societal forces. In the 1850s, Bismarck became alarmed by Prussia's isolation during the Crimean War, where Austria had sided with Britain and France against Russia, and Prussia had almost been excluded from the peace talks in Paris. By the year 1859, Bismarck was sent to the Russian Empire and assigned the role of Prussian ambassador. 3 years later, Otto von Bismarck was briefly moved to Paris as ambassador to the court of Napoleon III, visiting Britain in the summer of 1862. His diplomatic mission allowed him to meet and assess several key adversaries, such as Napoleon III in France, Lord Palmerston, and other high-ranking Russian officials. Bismarck worked to maintain friendly relations with Russia and forge a working relationship with Napoleon III's France. These alliances were necessary to both counter Austria and prevent France from aligning with Russia. Von Bismarck famously stated, "It is foolish to play chess when 16 out of 64 squares were declared off limits." As such, the Prussian nobleman had years of experience in diplomacy and foreign affairs under his belt, where he had become seasoned in Russian and French diplomacy. Despite his extended time abroad, Bismarck stayed closely connected to the German domestic affairs. He kept himself informed through War Minister Albrecht von Roon, with whom he developed a lasting friendship and political alliance. Being a reasonable candidate in a difficult time for Prussia, and in a dramatic rise to power, he was suddenly recalled in May of 1862 from Paris by the new Prussian king Wilhelm I, who succeeded his brother Friedrich Wilhelm IV. On the fateful day of the 23rd of September 1862, von Bismarck was appointed as Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Prussia. It is here that we must take a step back and disentangle the mess that was Prussian politics. In Berlin, there were various unsolved political obstacles. For more than 2 years, King Wilhelm had been stuck in a vicious cycle of political feuds with the Chamber of Deputies over military reform. A military man, the sexagenarian king considered it well within the realm of his power to increase the size of the Prussian military. However, the Chamber of Deputies, composed mostly of liberal members, refused to approve the budget required for the king's military ambitions. An enraged Wilhelm then refused negotiation nor compromise, considering this to be a compromise on state security. He thus prorogued parliament more than once, resulting in tensions between the king and the members of the Landtag. As one can see, in this atmosphere, the appointment of Bismarck makes much more sense, an appointment of a seasoned diplomat with conservative and loyalist tendencies to save Wilhelm's position and control over the military. Initially, Bismarck's position was shaky due to the distrust of King Wilhelm and the aforementioned hate of Queen Augusta. Yet, Bismarck soon acquired a powerful hold over the king, allowing him to focus on the military budget issue. While Bismarck, ever the pragmatist, first proposed a compromise to the king, he was forced to find another solution when this compromise was refused by a staunch Wilhelm. The solution? A loophole Bismarck found in the Prussian constitution, which allowed him to simply collect taxes on the basis of the old budget. This tactic, applied for 3 years from 1863 to 66, allowed Bismarck to implement military reforms without the sanction of parliament, furthering his image as a brilliant yet firm reactionary. It is with this budgetary context that on September 30th, 1862, that Otto von Bismarck gave his immortal speech to the Prussian House of Representatives, where he stressed the utter importance of the strength of Prussia's military for German unification, which was after all the aim of the liberals, by saying, Prussia must collect and keep its strength for the right moment, which has been missed several times already. Prussia's frontiers, as laid down by the Vienna treaties, are not conducive to a healthy national life. It is not by means of speeches and majority resolutions that the great issues of the day will be decided. That was the great mistake of 1848 and 49, but by blood and iron, sondern durch Eisen und Blut. Via this speech, Bismarck would eventually become known as the Iron Chancellor. The liberal opposition, however, chose to ignore Bismarck, hence causing a further intensification of the struggle between Bismarck and the liberals. Surprisingly, other notable Germans and supporters of a German unification through armed struggle even disagreed with Bismarck, fearing that his policies would bring Germany into the brink of devastation. Historian Heinrich von Treitschke, a supporter of a violent small German solution under Prussian leadership, was opposed to Bismarck's speech in 1862. Treitschke confided to his friend Wilhelm Nock, "You know how passionately I love Prussia. Yet when I hear such a shallow Junker as this Bismarck boasting about iron and blood, with which he wants to subjugate Germany, the meanness seems to be surpassed by the ridiculousness." This demonstrates the massive pressure Bismarck had to face in his early months in office, even amongst his own ranks. The relations between Bismarck and the liberals would not improve following the Alfensleben Convention of 8 February 1863, where Prussia under Bismarck and Russia under Tsar Alexander II agreed on a treaty to crush the Polish January uprising in Congressional Poland. The treaty, however, led to clashes in the Prussian Landtag. The struggle between Bismarck and the Diet continued, as after nearly 8 months in office, Bismarck had failed to achieve any agreement with the parliamentary opposition. The straw that broke the camel's back would come in late May of 1863, as the Diet sent a sharp note to the king, saying that it could no longer come to terms with von Bismarck. In response, a defiant Wilhelm dissolved the Diet, accusing it of trying to obtain unconstitutional control. Seizing the chance, Bismarck then issued an edict restricting the freedom of the press in an attempt to silence the critics, earning him wide infamy. Undoubtedly, his support amongst the Prussian power circles diminished to such an extent that even the Crown Prince, the rather liberal Friedrich III, voiced his concerns against Bismarck. As expected, the supporters of von Bismarck fared poorly in the elections of October 1863, where a liberal coalition won over 2/3 of the seats, resulting in calls for von Bismarck to be dismissed. Once again, however, the king stood by his prime minister, fearing that if he did indeed dismiss von Bismarck, the prime minister would be succeeded by a more liberal politician. With the storm having somewhat settled, Bismarck now had some room for respite to turn to foreign policy. This was to kill two birds in one stone. The Prussian calculated that a shift to foreign policy would not only allow him to achieve his dreams of Prussian expansionism and German unification, but he also hoped that success on this front would weaken the Prussian people and politicians' desire for political reform, where any diplomatic and military success would shift the intense pressure away from him and the king. The relief would come in November of 1863, with the death of King Frederick VII of Denmark due to the Schleswig-Holstein question. Two mostly German-speaking duchies which were in personal union with Denmark. This question sparked up once again because of the succession of both duchies, which was disputed between Christian IX, the new Danish king, and Friedrich von Augustenburg, a German-Danish nobleman. In Schleswig-Holstein itself lived two ethnic groups, the Ida Danes and the Northern Germans. The Danes, who had close to half the population in Schleswig but were less prominent in Holstein, aimed for a more firmly defined Danish national state. They also argued that Schleswig was part of Denmark but not Holstein. The Germans, on the other hand, argued that Schleswig-Holstein was a single, inseparable entity. Lord Palmerston, the British Prime Minister, summarized it best when saying, "The Schleswig-Holstein question is so complicated, only 3 men in Europe have ever understood it. One was Prince Albert, who is dead. The second was a German professor who became mad, and I am the third, and I have forgotten all about it." In this fragile atmosphere, the new Danish king committed a fatal mistake. When the new Danish king decided to sign the November Constitution due to the pressure of his liberal government, a constitution that annexed Schleswig without the agreement of the German Confederation, hence violating the London Protocol, Bismarck denounced the decision and was, essentially, handed over a golden pretext for war. The German Confederation already acted by December of 1863 and sent federal troops to occupy Holstein and Lauenburg. With support from Austria, von Bismarck issued an ultimatum by mid-January 1864 for Christian IX to return Schleswig to its former status within 48 hours. When Denmark refused, Austria and Prussia invaded the Duchy of Holstein proper on the 1st of February 1864, sparking the Second Schleswig War. The war was a disaster for Denmark, who performed poorly on land against the much better equipped Prussian forces armed with 4- and 6-pounder Krupp artillery. This Krupp artillery would prove useful during the siege and Battle of Diebel, where Prussian victory by late April 1864 marked the turning point of the war and paved the way for the subsequent Treaty of Vienna on the 30th of October of that year. Denmark ceded the duchies of Schleswig, Holstein, and Lauenburg to Prussia and Austria. Initially, it had been proposed that the Diet of the German Confederation, in which all the states of Germany were represented, should determine the fate of both duchies. Before this scheme could be effected, Bismarck induced Austria to agree on the Gastein Convention. Under this agreement, signed on the 20th of August 1865, Prussia received Schleswig, while the Habsburgs received Holstein and Lauenburg. The importance of this treaty cannot be understated, as it was engineered by Otto von Bismarck to provoke Austria into war with the aim of undermining Austria as the leader of the German Confederation, with the Prime Minister stating, "The Gastein Convention is the gluing together of cracks in the building." And indeed, Bismarck's aim was to achieve a Germany under the Prussian military boot. Yet, the Austro-Prussian War of 1866, also known as the War Between Brothers, will be covered in Part 2 of the series on Otto von Bismarck, the father of Germany. This has been Part 1 of 4 on Otto von Bismarck, where Bismarck's origins, rise to power, and his war with Denmark were explored. Subscribe to this channel to join us next time, as we discover how Bismarck managed to defeat the Austrian Empire in 1866 through careful diplomacy and planning. This has been the Historiographer, and for now, see you in the next video.